Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful that you have guided us with your eye, that you have given your word to us, that we can hear the voice behind us saying, "This is the way, walk ye in." Amen. We know, Lord, is that we walk in the light that is that is shining from the midnight cry, that is shining also from your word, that you will give us more light, that you will teach us and lead us to the heavenly city. And we just pray, Lord, that again, your Spirit can be here to teach us. Help me, Lord, in presenting these messages. The message of the 1850 chart. I pray that you can help each mind to be clear. And, bless the recording of these messages. May they go out to bless others as well. And thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer. And may your Holy Spirit be here. And in Jesus Christ's name we pray. So now I'm going to be dealing with the chart behind me, the 1850 chart, which of course we can see a little bit better up on the screen probably as we go through the different parts. But the 1850 chart was also directed by God. Ellen White says in Manuscript Releases number 13, page 359, "I saw that God was in the publishment of the chart by Brother Nichols. I saw there was a prophecy of this chart in the Bible," that is in Habakkuk 2, verse 1 to 4, which we just sang for you. "And if this chart is designed for God's people, if it is sufficient for one, it is for another. And if one needed a new chart painted on a larger scale, all needed it just as much. I saw that the charts, ordered by God, struck the mind favorably, even without an explanation." So the 1850 chart is organized in a similar manner to the 1843 chart. But there are some new truths on the 1850 chart that we learned after the Great Disappointment. And so these had to make everything a bit smaller in order to allow these things to be on the chart. We still have the center timeline with the chronological lists of the truths taught on the chart, with Christ in the center. So he's still on the chart there. He's just a lot smaller. And of course, that doesn't mean he's less important. Some people have, tried to make something of, that Christ isn't in this message. But of course, he's the center of the 1843 chart and the center of the 1850 chart. The numbers and calculations are all still there, including the 2520. So we see in the top right-hand corner there on the screen, before Christ 677, Israel carried captive, 2 Chronicles 33:11. The 7 times commence from Leviticus 26. And at the bottom there, explanation of the time. There's actually, the 2520 is expanded on the 1850 chart over what it was in its explanation on this chart over what it was on the 1843 chart. But we also have an addition of information on the 1843, in addition to the information on the 1843 chart, we see as well the three angels' messages on the 1850 chart. And notice that there is a division line here, which is going to come up when I deal with the 1863 chart, but you can see 1844. So the first and second angels' messages were given, it says here 1837 and 1843, and then the third angel's message, which is the angel that we're under now, which will swell into a loud cry, when it combines with the other two messages, and we'll see that later when we go through. The sanctuary truth is also on the chart, so you can see, we see the courtyard, the burnt offering, the laver, and then the holy place and the most holy place on the 1843 chart. And we also have United States in prophecy, which we're going to look at in a little bit of detail here, because it's one of the issues that I found very fascinating as I studied the 1850 chart. Now the 2520 on the 1850 chart, at the top of the central column is the same 677 BC date with the Bible text 2 Chronicles 33:11, as we pointed out in Leviticus 26. And these are both, the 1843 chart and the 1850 chart, are 25-20 charts. That is, they go 25-20 years. Of course, the 1843 chart is 1 year short, but they both are 25-20 charts. The 25-20 on the 1850 chart, we see the same calculations are found, right? So as we kind of pointed out, in the bottom right-hand corner of this chart, some people have said, you need a magnifying glass to see them. That's if you're looking at them on your iPhone, right? The fact is, they're very legible on here. You don't need a magnifying glass. You can walk up to the chart and look at it. So, but they made something of the fact that it's smaller. But Christ is also smaller on the 1850 chart. He's not less important, right? So things being smaller is just making room for the calculations. Now, of course, after October 22nd, 1844, Adventists were really focused on the 2300-day prophecy, and rightfully so, because the 2300-day prophecy, the cleansing of the sanctuary, is the foundation and pillar of Adventism. So in no way does the 25-20 diminish any of those truths. Those truths, it actually makes them clearer, and as we will see a little bit, as you study into these things. So there we see the chart. On the 1850 chart, we have 457 BC, so we have the starting date for the 2300-day prophecy, and it's in big letters, or big numbers. So it's the top center column. And then we also find the 2300-year prophecy mentioned at the bottom of that column, just above the 1844 date. So here on this chart, it mentions the 2300-year prophecy. And the bottom right-hand corner provides further explanations of this prophecy. You can see there with the arrow, it points to it there. So with the 25-20 and the 2300 days, they're both explained in a bit more detail on this chart. Now, we can see, and just as just a close-up of this, the 457 commencement of the 2300 days and the 70 weeks. The 2300 days and the ministration of Christ in the holy terminate in 1844. And then the explanation at the bottom, the length of the daily in Daniel, and then we also have 457 BC from 508 and all these different times. But you can see right in the bottom here, the 2300 days being mentioned. Okay, on the top, on the 1850 chart, we see Daniel's image is still at the top left-hand corner, but the broken pieces are not there. So in the 1843 chart, it had the image with the pieces broken of the division. This made room for the three angels of Revelation 14 to be on the chart. And we can see the different kingdoms, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Imperial, if you look there, Imperial and Imperial Rome, the fourth kingdom of Iron, Imperial Rome. And then we have Rome divided and the 10 kingdoms. So the toes serve well in marking out the division without having the pieces, the 10 pieces. The beasts of Daniel 7 are all assembled just to the right of the metal image. So we have the winged lion, the Media Persia with the bear, the four-winged leopard of Greece, the 10-horned pagan Roman beast, and the papal Rome beast and the little horn. The center timeline has been moved left and is now separating the columns of Daniel 7 beasts and Daniel 8 beasts. So it's a little bit different where they put the column on the chart, right? It's not right in the center, it's a little bit to the left. The facts and dates in the column are mostly the same as the 1843 chart. The major change was in moving the dates for the woe trumpets over to the Islamic horses to the right. Notice also that the bottom 1843 date error has been fixed, and it says 1844. So we know that this mistake was corrected in the Millerite movement under the Midnight Cry, right? It wasn't corrected after 1844. It was corrected before 1844. But in the 1850 chart, they still have it. So the mistake that was on the 1843 chart that people talk about has been corrected. And it was corrected by inspiration, by studying God's Word. Samuel Snow was the the main person involved in that, who presented God's word in the correction of that mistake. To the right of the center timeline column, we see the animals of Daniel 8. This column goes to the very bottom of the chart, and at the top we read Daniel 8:13 and 14. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The 2,300 days commence with the 70 weeks at the going forth of the decree of Artaxerxes to restore and build Jerusalem. In Daniel 9, verse 25, Ezra chapter 7, verse 12 to 26. This decree went into effect after Ezra had delivered the king's commissions unto the governors before Christ, 457. Okay? So we see that the daily is mentioned there, and to the early Adventists, the daily was paganism, which for 1,260 years trampled it down and scattered God's people. And then the transgression of desolation, which is the papacy, for 1,260 years persecuted the saints. And next we see that the ram with the uneven horns, with the two horns, one higher than the other, representing Medo-Persia, followed by the rough goat of Greece with the four horns, and another horn that waxes great and continues way down the chart. So this little horn, it grows a little bit, right? It goes way down the chart here. So as Adventists, I mean, we're very familiar with these images, but these are very well established early on, before 1850. Underneath the Grecian goat, we see the beasts of pagan and papal Rome. The little horn that began with the Grecian goat descends down the page past the Roman beasts. So the little horn power, it's going to be speaking, words against the Most High at the end. So they understood the role that the little horn would have, the papacy would have. And the papacy, the little horn represents both paganism and papalism in its different forms. So what is paganism, by the way? Does anybody know what paganism is? If we're going to put it into, a very small definition, a quick...
Worship of false gods?
Okay, it's a counterfeit of true worship of the earthly sanctuary, okay, of our sacrificing animals. What is papalism then in that context? What is papalism?
Counterfeit of Christ.
It's a counterfeit of true worship in heaven, right? And paganism and papalism both have 1,260 years. And we're going to look at that a bit more in detail. But it's important to understand what paganism and papalism is. If anybody's interested in understanding Miller's view, simple thing to do is read the 3rd chapter of The Great Controversy. Ellen White actually explains exactly what Miller understood about paganism and papalism. That view that's in chapter 3 of The Great Controversy is Miller's view of the daily and the transgression of desolation. She just doesn't talk about it in those terms, okay? But if you read that chapter, and even if you read the first 2 chapters of The Great Controversy, it gives stuff that leads up to that. And if you read the whole of The Great Controversy, that's even better. So, you got some reading ahead of you. Okay. So it says, is Daniel's daily on the 1850 chart as well? Well, we have more details. It says, first let's look at the slender center line column to the right of the feet of the metal man image. And it says here it is called the pagan dominion, or the daily, taken away. And then it says Daniel 11, verse 31, in 508. And the papacy set up in 538. So that's what's happening here. Pagan dominion or daily taken away, 508. Papacy set up, 538. Notice Christ had 30 years in preparation for his ministry. The papacy also, the counterfeit of Christ, has 30 years preparation for its counterfeit ministry. At the top center of the chart above the uneven horned ram, we see Daniel 8, 13 and 14 quoted with the word daily on the top line. Okay, so we have that from Daniel 8, the daily from Daniel 8. And next we see the daily and the explanation of the time at the bottom right-hand corner of the chart, the length of the daily, right? Of Daniel's daily it's talking about, which is 457. So from Daniel's perspective dealing with the daily was part of the 2300 days, right? And part of the 2300 days also deals with the transgression of desolation. There's two parts to it. But Daniel's dealing with the part that's, the daily has already begun in Daniel's time. That's why the question, how long? When a kid's in a car and he says, how long? He doesn't usually say that when he first gets in the car. It's when he's been driving a while, right? And then the kids say, how long? And we see that how long question in the Bible, the persecution of the saints in Revelation, how long shall we be avenged, right? This question, how long, is the same question everywhere you see it in the Bible. And it has the same answer. Just different lengths, because depending where you are, you know, when you're driving in a car and you're almost there, how long could be 10 minutes? How long could be an hour if you're, you know, been traveling for a while? So, hope that's a good analogy. On the 1850 chart, we see the same two beasts representing pagan and papal Rome. However, the third beast, with the woman riding it, is missing. So we don't see the woman, you know, drunk with the blood of the saints riding on this one. They just probably didn't have room for it. But they still, of course, believed it. So there we see papal Rome. And then on the 1850 chart, we see four angels. The first one announces the next three woe angels. So there's the three angels' messages on the chart, but there's also some other angels which are not part of the three angels. They're just other angels that are represented. So some are represented with the trumpets. Here's one representing delivering the three woes. And we see, just as on the 1843 chart, the first woe is Islam, and it says, remember the date, July 27th, 1299, as it determines the end of another time prophecy. Right? The second woe, so we have July 27th, 1299, add 150 years to July 27th, 1449. The second woe, which is an hour, which is 2 weeks, a day, 1 year, a month, 30 years, a year, 360 years, a total of 391 years and 15 days. From July 27th, 1449 plus 391 years equals July 27th, 1480 plus 15 days is August 11th, 1840. And this is in the Great Controversy. Ellen White says it was a remarkable fulfillment of prophecy. That fulfillment of this prophecy confirmed the year-day principle and gave a large impetus to the movement. People understood that this was a fulfillment of prophecy. Now, some people say, well, the Ottoman Empire went until the 1920s. Okay? But when a kingdom rises or falls, how do we judge it? I mean, do kingdoms just pop up in a day? No, they take time. And you'll see later in a quote by Uriah Smith, he says that kingdoms, when they come into history, when they come into contact with God's people, or when their power is diminished and given over. And so in the case of this, the power was given over to the Christian nations. So even though the nation of the Ottoman, Turkish Empire still existed, it was under Christian powers up until its final demise in the 1920s. The third woe begins quickly after the end of the second woe. Revelation 10:17 and 11:15-17 are quoted. Again, there is no horse, illustrating the third woe. So the third woe is kind of, we know it's going to come quickly. Quickly in the Bible sometimes is, not as quick as...
Behold, I come quickly.
Yes. My reward is with me. But we see that we are under the time of the seventh angel sounding. The third woe comes into history September 11th, 2001. But we're not doing a study on that, but it's a very interesting study. On the bottom left-hand corner of the 1850 chart, we see the six angels. The first two are enlarged here and illustrate the first two angels' messages, so which we pointed out a little earlier. And then after 1844, we have the third angel's message. And below that, we see Christ with a sickle and a crown and a rainbow over his head, right, harvesting. And the The fourth angel calls Christ to thrust in his sickle and reap. Angel 5 has another sickle. Right, so we have two different harvests, the harvest of the righteous and the wicked. The fifth angel with the sickle goes to the sixth angel, which is located on the right of the sanctuary diagram. So there's some details there in which they're trying to illustrate our messages. Now, these charts were very effective. There was only 300 of the 1850 charts made, by the way, just like there was of the 1843 charts. They did make a chart, which I don't have here, but the 1850, I believe it's the 1857 chart or 1856 chart, which is not as nice a chart. It was smaller. It was a paper chart. The beasts and the images are not in really good detail. They're more outline drawings. So sometimes that is represented on the internet as the 1850 chart, but when you look at it, it doesn't look the same. So it's there is the 1857 chart, and that one, I don't know how many copies they made of that, but they were out of it by the time they made the 1863 chart. The sixth angel instructs the fifth angel to harvest the earth's grapes and cast them into the God's winepress of wrath. Notice that the sixth angel has power over fire. Right? And just inside the corner of the six angels is found the diagram of the sanctuary. The explanation to the right clearly teaches what happened on October 22nd, 1844. So there's an explanation here of the sanctuary. So we know what happened October 22nd, 1844. Now we have here the image of the papacy. On the 1850 chart, just below the papal Roman beast is another beast labeled the image of the papacy. And it says here, the two lamb-like horns, republicanism and Protestantism, whose names number 666, become united in action, speaking like a dragon, and control the civil legislature and cause it to make the church the image of the papacy, which received a deadly wound and was healed. Now, do we believe this? I've actually had people who said that this is a major error on the 1850 chart. And what they say that it means is that the names of the Protestant churches add up to 666, whose names number 666. Now, I've tried to find this in Adventist writings, and I could not find that Adventists ever accepted that view. So in a literal sense, they never accepted the idea of 666 as representing anything literal. They understood it as representing the mark of the beast, which is the character of the papacy. Now, so the person who points this out to me as major error, I keep asking him what he thinks of this statement by Sister White. Now, this statement is made in 1847. The 1850 chart is 3 years later. There was still a development of an understanding that was happening regarding the image of the papacy. So we know that this two-horned beast rose in 1798, and we're going to do a little study on it. But the two horns, originally, there was different understandings of what these meant. And actually, on the 1850 chart, if you come and look at it closely, you can see somebody used whiteout and wrote in Republican and Protestantism, because originally they put Papist and Protestant were the two horns. So in 1850, they had not developed the idea that it was Republicanism and Protestantism. Okay? They did not know that. It was J. N. Andrews in 1851, a year after this chart was made, and that they corrected on the 1850 chart. So to say it was a major error, it was a development of an understanding. It's not like they abandoned some truth, but they had a clarification of truth. And so Ellen White says here in Word to the Little Flock, I saw all that would not receive the mark of the beast and of his image in their foreheads or in their hands could not buy or sell. Revelation 13:15-17. I saw that the number 666 of the image beast was made up. And that doesn't mean it was, thought up in the head. It means it was fulfilled, right? Revelation 13:18. And that it was the beast that changed the Sabbath, and the image beast had followed on after and kept the Pope's and not God's Sabbath. And all we were required to do was to give up God's Sabbath and keep the Pope's. And then we should have the mark of the beast and of his image. So we can see here, this is basically saying the same thing. How many people think this is not saying the same thing? I mean, I don't want you to stand out. I mean, maybe you can tell me later. But to me, it's saying the same thing as what's on the 1850 chart. It's awkwardly worded in both to me, in both, because it's being partly understood. But, you know, when you look at the 1850 chart, if we go back here, it's just awkward. Whose name's number 666. It's not clarified what this means, but we can see that the 666 is the mark of the beast. Sunday observance is the way that they looked at it. They had not attached 666 to Vicarius Filii Dei of the Pope, but it does not mean that they did not look at the mark of the beast as belonging to the Pope, because they did, because it's the Pope who created Sunday observance. So to them, 666 represents the mark of the beast, which is Sunday keeping. And the Protestant churches were Sunday keepers. So that's what they mean when they say that the names, whose names number 666. Has to do with their character, not the actual literal number of names. Okay, I hope that's clear. If anybody has questions on later on that, they can ask me if it's not clear. Now, just a little look at this two-horned beast, the lamb-like beast. Now, we're not here doing a study in detail on Revelation, but when you deal with the 7 heads of the beast, you know, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and 1 is not yet come. The one that is at the end of 1798, and it's this beast. The United States represents that power that arose in 1798. Now, when did the United States begin? Anybody know? What year?
1776.
Okay, that's what we always think, but that's the Declaration of Independence. The United States became a nation in 1798, at least recognized by the other countries of the world. It's when it got a navy, and it was now a nation. And so that's when it arose, was 1798, not 1776. Okay, so we see that this beast, nation, kingdom, political entity, coming up to grow or spring up as a plant in the unpopulated area of the earth, opposite the sea, which denotes peoples, nations, multitudes. It has 2 horns, republicanism and Protestantism. It has horns like a lamb, but spake as a dragon. Now, these horns are church and state, and they're now separated, right? Separation of church and state. But this beast is going to unite church and state at the end. Okay? It's going to work with the papacy. So this 2-horned lamb-like beast is Protestant America. Ellen White wrote, "Through the 2 great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. While the former lays the foundation of spiritualism, the latter creates a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp the hands with the Roman power. And under the influence of this threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience." And how many of you have seen Doug Batchelor's presentation on Tony, what's his name? Palmer? Yes. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, so you need to watch it. Doug Batchelor does a presentation. Tony Palmer, who is an Anglican bishop, met with a large congregation of leading Protestants in America. The other guy there is Kenneth Copeland, I believe, is the guy who gets up and speaks. And they get a message directly from the Pope that Tony Palmer recorded with his iPhone, and Kenneth Copeland gives a message back to the Pope on the iPhone. This is a fulfillment of prophecy. I suggest you all find that on the internet. Have we seen the Protestants of the United States stretching their hand across the gulf to clasp hands with the Roman power?
Yes.
Yes, we have. And, if all of us are over, 25, well, maybe we'd have to be like 35 to remember. But, yes, this happened in 1989. Of course, this is a Time magazine from February 24th, 1992. Some of this stuff that happened was behind the scenes. And I remember listening to CBC Radio some years after that, where they went through and talked about this, what had happened behind the scenes. Now, it tells us to read Revelation 19, verse 19 to 20. I guess I could do that. Oops. There we go. Kind of skip through here. So, guess I could have put that Bible verse right there if I'd wanted to, but Revelation 19, verse 19 to 20. I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. So the false prophet is the United States. Okay? Okay, I need to get to...
I always thought it was Protestantism.
Protestantism is the false prophet.
Right.
Yeah, the United States. Well, it's the United States in two forms, republicanism and Protestantism. Okay? So it's Protestant America, technically. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, we got that. So can there be any doubt that the false prophet is the same as the lamb-like beast of Revelation 13? Right? So we all know about wolves in sheep's clothing. So the time of the end in biblical prophecy is understood to begin in 1798 at the end of the 1260-year prophecy of papal dominion and persecution. It also marks the rise of the nation represented by the lamb-like beast that arose out of the earth. This year also marks the end of the earlier 2520-year prophecy of the seven times, which began in 722 BC and extend to 1798. That should be 723 BC. Okay. And so characteristics of the lamb-like beast, different in origin from European or Middle Eastern powers of previous prophecies, arises in a peaceful manner, becomes a recognized power around 1798, must be republican in its form of government, must be Protestant in its religion, and performs its work after 1798. So that's the end of that.
What is a republic?
A republic is a constitutional government that doesn't have a king, right? So there's no king. So hopefully we have a few more questions. Yeah, thank you. How much time do I have still? 20 minutes, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So I know I went through some of those things very quickly. Is there anything that you would like to review? Any questions about the 1850 chart? I mean, obviously we can see that it has everything that's on the 1843 chart is on the 1850 chart.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like that part that you talked about where it's whited out with the...
Yeah, where it said papist and Protestant.
Like, how does that jive with the quote in Spirit of Prophecy, which says that the chart shouldn't be altered in this by inspiration?
Well, she's talking about the 1843 chart when she talks about, and she's talking about the figures on the chart, which are the prophetic periods that were first seen to end in 1843 and then later seen to end in 1844. So there have been some people who've taken a position that everything on the chart is correct. You know, it's like the charts are inspired, directed by God, every detail is correct. But that's not true. There's things that we're developing and understanding, obviously things that Miller did not get correct. We do see on this chart, everything that's on that chart is on this chart. So there's a few dates, but all the prophecies are the same, right? So they didn't reject in 1850 when we had developed our truths and our understanding of truths, they didn't reject any of those truths that were on the 1843 chart. Okay? Now, there is a development of truth, as I talked in studying when we go through Adventist history. There's things that Adventists didn't know, for instance, in 1863. What happens in 1863? We're going to give a little bit of a preview to the 1863 chart. What happens in 1863? Okay, well, that's too many. So we got the church. The church becomes an organized church. What else happens in 1863?
Isn't that when they incorporate the names?
Well, they actually had the name before 1863. They were called Seventh-day Adventists before that. But they became an official organization. The health message came in 1863. Okay? And which is really important in the context of whatever it was we were talking about. Oh, development of truth, right? So Adventists, did they know about pork before 1863? No. Okay? So there were still truths that had to unfold. Now, of course, that could be considered an old error, but there are some things that, and as I said, some things that we have in our own understanding, in our own experience, we understand to be truth. And when God comes along and gives us more light, it's not like we abandon that. We just say, I understand more about it now. Right? Our understanding wasn't wrong, it just wasn't complete. And is our understanding complete today? So does that mean everything we believe is error? No. It's truth, but there are things that we just don't see. And so God reveals those things to us. And he did that even after 1850. He revealed to them, through J. N. Andrews, that the two horns represented church and state in its Republican and Protestant form at the beginning. Right? But at the end, it becomes the combination of church-state power united with churchcraft and statecraft, right? United together to persecute God's people. But that wasn't understood in 1850. But it doesn't mean it was error. Of course, they corrected it. And they got a greater understanding dealing with Protestantism and its role. But that's just God revealing truth to his people. And now, part of the problem that we have is I've run into people, a professor from Andrews who I talk with all the time on Facebook, and he's just, well, that chart's all full of errors. This chart's got lots of errors, right? It just has to be in the Bible. These charts just represent past errors, basically, to him. I'm kind of putting words in his mouth, but they just represent errors that we've abandoned. Eventually we're probably going to abandon everything on those charts. And he'll just say, well, they are errors that led us to God. So that now we know that, we all can just love each other, right? I mean, I shouldn't make fun of it and we shouldn't laugh about it. I grew up in the United Church of Canada. My dad was a United Church minister. My grandfather was a Methodist minister. And I saw what happened in the United Church as they deteriorated I was born in 63. In the 60s, the church I went to was full of young people. By 75, the church had, I think we might have had 20 people attending a church that was, 500, 600 people before that, right? And the people who were left had beliefs like Jesus didn't really exist, or if he did, he didn't get resurrected. There definitely was no virgin birth, right? And of course, we know what the United Church is today, right? But those things happen step by step. They didn't happen all in a day. And we see those same things happening within Adventism. Now, the church, Ellen White says, will appear that it is about to fall, but it will not fall. The sinners in Zion will be sifted out. There are many people calling people out of the churches. That is wrong. That is an error. Ellen White says there will never be another calling out of the church. Right? We need to stick to Christ. Obviously, we're not just going to follow the denomination, right? Because there's many errors there. But we need to stick to Christ, and we need to stick to one another. We need to press close to one another. I mean, we have to stand up for truth. And if we get disfellowship for standing up to truth, just find another Adventist church to attend, right? Because this is God's church, as you're going to see. I'm going to deal with that a little bit in the next one. But yeah, I don't want anybody getting the idea that somehow just because there are people who have rejected the foundation of Adventism, which is our prophetic foundation upon which all other truths stand, all the pillars stand. The sanctuary is the foundation and pillar, central pillar of our message. And it's extremely important. And in studying these other things, these are things that are the foundation that undergird all of our truths. They're not meant to take away from the sanctuary or any other doctrine. They're not something that's there to replace what we know. I know when I first became an Adventist, as I mentioned, reading the book by Walter Martin, Kingdom of the Cults, that there was some questions that I had in my mind, but I put them on the back burner, and I kept talking to ministers of other denominations, going to the library and reading, trying to find an answer to the questions regarding the chronology of Adventism. And I've had those questions in my mind. I'm Adventist now for 31 years, but I had those questions not answered until I've been an Adventist for 28 years, that I understood it. And it's understanding these prophecies that now I can have confidence. Sure, there was always that doubt in my mind in the past, but I'll show you in the 1863 chart how solid Adventism's prophetic foundation is, and how the 1863 chart supports that foundation. And it's a little bit controversial presentation on the 1863 chart, but we will go through that. So any more questions? How much time do I have? 10 minutes? Okay.
Just a thought, Theodore, the other neighbor were talking about the difference between an error and a mistake. You can take an error and you can alter it, dust it, polish it off, do everything with it. It's never going to change. It's going to be error. But a mistake is just something you take a certain way and you just miss the meaning of it. It's kind of where the meaning of the word comes from.
Yeah, it's something that's overlooked.
Yeah.
It's missed.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a mistake, you know.
If you look at the two parts of the word miss and take, it's almost like if I took a photograph of that, but I took an inch off the left side.
Yeah.
It's not going to look right, is it? But if I center it and I get all the information in there and I get the complete picture, right, the right vision of it, it's going to come clear. And if we add a year here and we tweak a year here, and that historical 158, for example, is changed over to 159, let's say, or 163, it doesn't affect what's on that chart. But if something is complete error on there, it doesn't fit at all, it'll never fit.
Right.
It's an error.
We don't see that on these charts. We don't see stuff that's absolute error that we have to throw away. But for many people, they say, well, the 7 times is an error, and we're going to deal with that in detail on the 1863 chart, and it's amazing. Has anybody here studied fractals? Basically, I'm going to show you a fractal in the Bible. So very, very interesting. Of course, it's not a visual fractal exactly, though it has some visual aspects to it, I guess. But it's amazing how God works. Okay, well, let's close with prayer, and we're going to take, after prayer, we're just going to take a 15-minute break, so we're going to have a nice break. After the 1863 presentation, I'm actually going to probably do a longer presentation on the 1863 chart, and we're going to have more questions then at that time. But let's just kneel for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we ask for strength, Lord, to get through the rest of these meetings. We know, Lord, that you are bringing light to our minds. We just ask that we can walk in that light again. Thank you for your word. Thank you for Christ and what he has done for us. We just pray that our time here, as we talk together, that we will glorify your name and help us to have clear minds and relaxed minds to understand the things that we will have in the last meeting. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.